Something I hear a lot is that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, and I can understand the confusion because God is all-encompassing. He is the creator, and so there can only be one creator of everything. So surely when we're talking about God, don't we mean the same thing? And many people believe that. But again, this is why the books are so important, because the books tell us about God, about how God has revealed himself. And in the Bible, God has revealed himself very differently. And I should say in the person of Jesus Christ, this is very, very different to the God of Islam as recorded in the Quran and in the rest of the Islamic sources. We can see in the very, very first book of the Torah in Genesis that we are serving different gods. So in the Bible, we just take all of the Jewish scriptures, we take the full Jewish Bible, and that is our Old Testament. Now the Quran says that they accept the Torah, they accept the gospel, but yet they presented different stories to what we find in the Torah. So in Genesis, in the Adam and Eve story that we find both in the Torah and both in the Quran, we have two different outcomes. In the Torah, in Genesis 3, we see that God is actually on earth with Adam and Eve when they have eaten this fruit. They have known that this is wrong, and God apportions judgment to both to Adam, to Eve, and to the serpent. And there are consequences for what they've done, and they are immediately taken out of God's presence, yet he clothes them with animal skin. And there's this idea of redemption. I'm sure you guys know the story. This is very, very different in Islam. In Islam, this doesn't happen on earth. Adam and Hawa is the name for Eve in Islam. Adam and Hawa are not on earth, they're actually in paradise. And Satan deceives them and he makes them slip. So now this isn't a decision that, they know they're not meant to eat the fruit, yet they eat it anyway. Satan does something to make them slip. And it is literally just a slip. It's not what we find in the Bible. It is not a complete rejection of God's law, and therefore it's terrible, breaks the relationship, and there's separation from God now. No, what we find in Islam is they've just made a mistake, and therefore God just needs to send guidance. There doesn't need to be a whole plan of redemption. No animal needs to be killed to clothe their nakedness. We don't find that. So right from the beginning, we are finding different theologies. And I should say that God is not with Adam and Hawa. So in the Bible, we find God coming to earth and speaking to Abraham, God coming to earth and speaking to Hagar. We find God coming and speaking, God speaking to Gideon and to the parents of Samson. Whereas in Islam, God actually never ever comes to earth. We as Christians are talking about a relational God, a God who actually steps into where we are, steps into our circumstances, sees that we're naked and clothes us. And ultimately we see the fulfillment of that in Jesus Christ by him clothing our nakedness with his blood, giving us his righteousness and restoring the relationship which is lost. This is how God has revealed himself. This is how God has revealed his purpose in the Bible. With Islam, it's very different. God is not relational like that. He doesn't step into our situation. He is always distant, always far off. He will send guidance. He will send words to teach us how to live and get us through tests on life, but we never actually really get to connect with him. That's not what God is there for. God is just to worship, to obey, and never to have a deep relationship with him. In Islam, you are not made in the image of God. This is actually almost blasphemous to say you're made in the image of God if you're a Muslim, and where it's very, very different. I mean, it's one of the first things that we learn about ourselves in the Bible, that we are made in the image of God. And so you can see very clearly there is a different concept of what God is like in the Bible and what God is like in the Quran. And through the fullness and the revelation of Jesus Christ, we can know God intimately. This is something you can't do in the Quran. So the God of the Bible and the God of the Quran are very, very different.